Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast. I'm not even going to say the best podcast anymore. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows. Even Joe Rogan knows. So your favorite podcast, Tank Talk Podcast. Jason, we have a rather fun topic to talk about today, something that you and I both have a lot of experience in. I don't know if your experience, I don't know if you've done it as many times as I have, but I've done this 8 times.
Wow.
What is it that I've done 8 times that we're going to talk about today?
We are going to be talking about how to build a fish room. I've done it twice, so not quite as many times, but I've also taken one down. So I don't know if that counts for anything. I'm sure you've also built them and taken them down as well. But I think collectively, we have learned a ton about what it takes to build a fish room that you're actually going to enjoy long term. And so that's what we hope to accomplish today.
Yeah, and this is one of those topics that we were debating before we started. Like, have we talked about this before? I'm not sure if we have. When we just passed the 100 episode milestone several weeks ago. When you've got that many topics, when we're not a podcast that we just start up and see what happens. We always have a topic that we want to focus on. It's hard after you've done over 100 to find a topic you haven't already covered. So if we are repeating, it's okay, because we probably have different things to say than we did last time. And we certainly don't expect that everybody who's listening to this episode has heard every episode that we've done. So it'll be new to a lot of people. That's true. Make us feel a little bit better about ourselves. But building a fish room, this is, you said you've taken one down. Well, if I've built 8 fish rooms, that means I've taken 7 of them down. So I have vast experience in both the setup and the teardown of fish rooms. And I can tell you the teardowns are a lot more not fun than the setups. When you're setting up a fish room, it's so exciting and you're full of all of this anticipation, and tearing it down is the absolute opposite of that. It is the worst. Usually, in my experience, when you're tearing one down, it's because you have to, because you're moving or you're shutting a business down or you're moving a business or whatever it is. So that's usually never any fun. But we're not going to talk about tearing them down today. We're going to talk about setting them up. And I think it's important to first of all talk about, in my opinion, maybe there's more. I think there's 2 reasons why you would set up a fish room. What are those 2 reasons?
Personal or business. You want to start breeding or importing a ton of fish, or you just want, like I did, to relive your childhood and basically walk into a fish store in your own domicile and enjoy it. So I've done both. You've done both. And they can have slightly different build qualities, but I think the basic premise and the underlying principles are going to be the same that we talk about today.
They are, when you're talking about the most important decision, which we'll get into. But I do think, in my opinion, they are very different. A great example is what you have behind you versus what you have on the other side of your basement. 2 completely different things. And the setups are completely different. They're not only different purposes, but the way you have those set up when you're doing it for your hobby tanks, like your gallery behind you, you're probably going to focus a lot more on filtration and your aquascapes and all of those kind of things. If you're doing it for the purposes of importing fish, quarantining them and then selling them, you're not as concerned about how they look and all of that. But so there's a lot of decisions that have to be made when you're setting it up for whichever purpose you're setting it up. But the first decision, I think, is the most important. And you might be thinking I'm going a different direction than I am, but I'd like to ask you, what is the first decision and probably the most critical decision before you set up your fish room?
My first
after
decision,
what the purpose is,
right?
then the next thing.
My first decision, and the thing I would think people really need to hone in on, is where are you building? Is this where you're going? I like
Yes.
this.
Yep.
Where are you doing this? Are you doing this in your home? Are you doing it in an outbuilding on your property? Are you doing it in a completely different location? Because that is a massive decision. And depending on whether or not it's for enjoyment or business, is going to make a big difference too.
100%. Sometimes you and I've been in this situation every single time I've set up a fish room until here. Well, actually, no, I'm saying that wrong. No, I guess I'm saying it right. Who cares? I'm scatterbrained. You may only have one place that you can do it. I've been to your home. You have a beautiful home there in Illinois, and that's really your only option where you have your fish room. You're not going to put it in the middle of your living room. I mean, a tank could be in your living room, but you're not going to set up a fish room there. Although we have friends who have. We call them crazy people, but
In a good way.
absolutely. But you may be, you wouldn't want to put your setup, even if you were capable of it, on your second floor. Right. You're going to want it to be on concrete, which is down in your basement. Most people are going to be putting their fish room in a basement or a garage. Let's be honest. For me, I could have, I have two outbuildings. Very fortunate when we bought this place. We have this building that I'm sitting in now. We also have a barn, which is fully finished. It's the reason why we bought this place, so that we could move our business to this place and have not only an area for the aquariums, but also an area to use as a warehouse. So I did have two options, but to kind of make the point further, in my house, there are 0 places that I could build a fish room because I'm in Northeast North Carolina. We don't have basements here. I don't know anybody that has a basement where I'm at. And it's just because the ground is too unstable, and with the hurricanes and with all of that stuff, they don't build basements here. And so all of my entire house, there's no concrete in my house at all. So I could put an aquarium in my house, but there's no way I could set up something like I have in here, because the floors just wouldn't be able to handle it. I shouldn't say there's no way. Without putting in new structure, there really wouldn't be any way. So a lot of people, including me, the first 8 times I did this, 7 times, I had no other choice but to put it where I did. But it is the most important decision. And you hit on something. I've done whole videos about this. I think it is absolutely critical to have your fish room be in an area that you're going to be in every single day. Not a destination location, because when it is a destination location, I promise you're not going to go to that location as much as you think you're going to. So if you only have one spot, hopefully that one spot is somewhere where you're going to be there all the time and be able to enjoy it. And it doesn't become a chore.
Right. Yeah. And keep in mind, even in a basement or in your building right next to your house, you don't get there as much. I hear this coming all the time. Man, if I had that fish room, I'd be down there all the time. Until it becomes ordinary. And trust me, then you have to make a conscious decision. Hey, there's nothing in my basement. Now, for me, I luck out because this is my work area. So I'm down here all the time. And this is what I see. But on the other side, the fish room side, it's one of the reasons why we are converting it to more of a lounge area over there, because there is no reason for me to be there unless I just want to wander around my fish room. So be really careful about identifying the reasons why you want to be there and then making sure that it's practical. You're actually going to go and spend time there, because you get into a habit real fast. Feed fish, go back upstairs. Feed the fish, go back upstairs. And you're like, why do I even have this thing after a while?
I got to be brutally honest with you, and I'm embarrassed by this. This building that I'm sitting in right now, it's 300 feet from my house. So it's a football field away. It's not right next to the house, but it is at the end of my driveway. It's not like I got to get in the car and drive here. I'm in here today. This is the first time I've been in this room since Monday, and we're recording on Friday. So, and I'm ashamed to admit that. But it's true. And it's, I have a busy lifestyle. I'm running my business. I'm chasing Lisa around. I'm doing these things. And so it's just one of those things that I don't get out here as much as I'd like to. The fish are taken care of. Lisa's out here every single day and she feeds my fish for me. And, we got a good thing going there. And if something was wrong, she would definitely tell me. But, life gets in the way and it becomes a chore to go out there and get it. So just focus a lot of attention on where you're going to put it. And I've told people, if you have a really good situation where you've got a couple of tanks in your living room that you spend a lot of time with because you're in your living room every day, and maybe you got a tank or two in your office and you're really enjoying the hobby the way you have it set up, and you're thinking about putting everything in one room and making it a central fish room, just spend time thinking about that. Are you going to enjoy it as much as you do now? And if you're anything like me, you won't. I'm just being honest.
And same thing. All I have to do is walk down 2 flights of stairs. But Eli feeds the fish, and there can be a couple days where if I'm not down here in front of the computer, which is very rare, but certainly on the weekends, I don't have to be down here as much. I might be a couple days before I come down here. Now, again, is there, just like you, is there always somebody down here once or twice a day observing the tanks? The likelihood that something bad's going to happen is pretty minimal anyway. Right. So, yeah, it might be a couple days where you're like, I should probably go down there and see what's going on. It happens. And you may not think so. So those of you who are listening who are like, man, if I had this gallery, if I had the 300-gallon behind John's head, or I had a fish room and I'd be down there every day, it'd be like pure heaven. It's just what I would do. Now, don't get me wrong. I know people in our fish clubs that have fish rooms, and I'm sure you know people too. Yeah, that is something they spend a significant amount of time enjoying, but for a lot of people, it gets ordinary, and all of a sudden, you're not down there as much.
And dare I say, it becomes a chore. And that's
100%.
That's when things, you got to start questioning yourself. Should I have even done this to begin with? Again, even for me, I didn't have another choice. Yeah, we could have put them in the barn, but I couldn't put them in my house. I've said it so many times. Some of my best memories as a fish keeper is sitting in my recliner watching TV, back in the day when we used to watch TV, and having a 125-gallon tank, which is actually sitting right there now, right next to my TV, with arowanas and stingrays in it, and I would find myself watching that tank more than I would the TV. And I miss that. I definitely miss that. But anyway, we could probably do an entire episode on the location of a fish room. But when you make your decision, let's say it's in a basement, I know what my very first question I'm going to ask about that area is going to be, but what is your first question you're going to ask about that spot that you've chosen for the fish room?
Well, at this point, there's a number of things that you have to consider. And I think one, before anything, I'm going to want to identify my fish, the types of fish I want to keep, because that's going to have an impact on all the other things that I'm thinking about. And I think where you're going with it as well, because you could decide, hey, you know what? I've got a primary interest in Goodeids. You don't need to heat that room at that point. You can save a ton of money. It's going to dictate everything about, is it insulated, all that kind of stuff that I think we're going to go to in a second. But if you identify what your interests are, because that's also going to determine tank sizes and all kinds of stuff, right? So I'm going to try to identify what is it that I'm interested in.
I think that's a good pull, but it wouldn't be my first question.
Okay.
Because the very first thing I'm going to look into, it doesn't matter what kind of fish you keep. It doesn't matter if you're breeding or if you're just keeping them for display or if you're reselling, whatever it is, you need water in that room. And
Great point. Yes, absolutely.
Access to water is something that will make or break a fish room.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if you hear nothing else from this, because I've done it every single way, if you set up a fish room in a room that does not have water, like a sink at least, or something like that, Preferably something like I call them laundry sinks, but a lot of people
Yeah.
call them slop sinks, utility sinks, and also, in a perfect world, a drain in the floor.
Yeah.
That can make or break a project, because believe me, if you're slinging buckets or if you're running hoses all the way across your basement, all the way over and up the stairs, and what a nightmare that is. So before anything else, if it may be the biggest expense you have, if you have to hire a plumber to run a line or whatever it is, know where you're going to get your water from and know where your water's going to go before you do anything else.
That is an outstanding point. Well done.
Thank you.
You're 100% right. And I actually lived out that pseudo nightmare almost. But when we had this area, and there was about, I don't know, maybe at one point we had 8 or 10 aquariums. It was myself, and when the boys were young, I mean, they were single digit years old, but they've been helping since basically they were born. We had to run a 50-foot Python hose up our stairs into the kitchen and then connect to the kitchen sink and then run all the way back down in here. And so you would hear us on water change days like, all right. And all right meant start the water upstairs, and then it would flow. And then you hear, okay. And that would mean turn the water off. The tank is full. And we would just do that. And every once in a while, somebody upstairs wouldn't hear the second, okay. You start hearing, all right, turn it off, right? But it was kind of a pain, because it was absolutely always, for the most part, a 2-person job, because on some of the smaller tanks, you'd be down here. You wouldn't have time necessary to run upstairs, turn the water off before you overflowed that tank.
Right.
So, you're absolutely right. One of the first things we did is, once we decided on building an actual fish room on the other side, was put in that utility sink, and it was a game changer. And we have 2 floor drains in the basement as well, where we can deal with our wastewater, and it changed everything. I would go so far as to say, if you don't have that ability, don't put a fish room in that area.
I agree, especially in a situation like yours, where if you had if you were using your kitchen sink, which is on the first floor above the basement, I mean, you're not going to get a siphon to work that way. So you're draining into the drains in the floor, which you have the blessing of having that. But I'm assuming the drains were there all along.
Oh,
right?
yeah, because we've got a couple sumps in our basement. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, the drains are absolutely huge, and they go right along with the access to water. And I understand it is a major expense. I have plumbing experience, so I could do it myself but I realize not everybody does, and you got to pay a pro. It might cost you $1,000, have a professional come out to put in a drain. That could be outrageous if they're breaking up concrete and all of that kind of stuff. But the new water, the access to the new water is absolutely critical. But to stay on utilities, electrical's another one. I've done fish rooms before where we had like 2 outlets for the whole thing. And you're running extension cords and you're tacking them up to the ceiling, and it's a whole disaster and it's a whole mess, and you're tripping breakers, and having appropriate amounts of electrical. A lot of this stuff that we use, heaters in particular and pumps and things like that, they draw a lot of power. So the 2 outlets that you have in the room that you're planning on running 18 tanks off of might not cut it.
No, it's definitely not. And that's another really great point. Before we set up the fish room, I had my buddy came out. He's a union electrician. And I'm like, dude, I just, like you were saying, I literally had, besides the outlets that were dedicated to the sumps, 2 additional outlets, one on the fish room side and one over here. I'm like, can you add and do it on a different breaker? The room over there got 3 additional outlets, one on each wall. This one got 2 additional outlets on a separate breaker. And that has worked out better. Do I wish I would have actually done 2 on each wall on the other side? 100%, because even with that extra power, I still have power strips. Now they're drilled into the stands and stuff, but I still have to run power strips there. And I wished I would have had more direct electricity coming out of those walls. And that's another one where you talked about the plumber being expensive. Luckily, I had a buddy who's a union electrician. I know you're pretty handy with that stuff. I don't know how to do electricity and plumbing. So I'm not going to mess with something that can kill me in terms of electricity or something that can flood my house in terms of plumbing. So and if you're like me with those two areas, it's going to cost, and it's going to cost big to get that set
Yep.
up. So you got to build that in from the start, but do it and do it right from the beginning. Because once you've got tanks and racks and stuff up, it becomes exceedingly difficult to start adding stuff behind those tanks.
Yeah, when I say I have experience and I can do it, I have my limitations when it comes to electrical. I do like to consider myself like, what is it, a jack of all trades but a master of none. Like, I can do some things when it comes to electrical. When you start having me run like switches and stuff like that, no, I'm out. I don't know how to figure all that stuff out. But if I have an outlet and I want to add two additional outlets, I could do that. That's not that big of a deal. There's one thing that I know I just talked about the importance of access to water, and I believe that wholeheartedly. But I've had fish rooms before that did not have water in the immediate area. I had to run hoses, and it all worked out. I have never, in 32 years of keeping fish, I've never had enough power outlets. It's never been, I'm ashamed to admit, like, behind every single one of my tanks right now is a mess of spaghetti wires and power strips, and I've never had my power situation be something that I'm happy with. Even in here, when we bought this place, it already had outlets like every 5 feet. They're already in here, but it's still not enough. I can't stand the spaghetti pile of power cords and all of the AC adapters and all of that stuff. It drives me absolutely insane. So, like you just said, if you're going to put in 6 new outlets,
do 12.
Do 12. And it will not cost you as much as you think. It'll cost you way more to have an electrician come back out and add 6 more on top of the 6 that you already have. Just get them to do all 12 at one time. And buy once, cry once. It's going to hurt a little bit, but it'll hurt a lot less than if you have to have them come back, or you have the disaster that I have in every fish room I've ever had, which is just a mess of wires. I hate that so much.
And not only that, but have them put half of your power on one breaker and half on another. Because even when I did that, I still can blow I can still trip a breaker down here. And I've done it. And it got really concerning when we had 80 tanks, when we had 40 behind me and 40 on the other side. Between the central air pumps, I keep in mind, you've got, I might need a space heater on once in a while. I've got 2 dehumidifiers running. I have some heaters in some tanks. And you got canisters over here in some of your aquariums. That all the lights. And I got to a point where I knew, okay, if that space heater is on over there and I've got the 2 dehumidifiers running and they're both on, if I turn on this extra thing, it's going to trip the breaker. And it's very stressful knowing that the entire time. Like, I am this close to plugging in something, a vacuum, and being like, I just tripped everything. Gosh darn it. And then you trip your breaker for your canisters and they're all like and making the noise like, it's really annoying. So if you hear nothing else, double the amount of outlets and double the number of circuit breakers you think you're going to need, because that way, everything we're talking about today is with the big picture in mind and with your fish room fully optimized. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah. And if you want to do it absolutely by the book perfectly, when your electrician comes out, give him a list of everything that you're going to be plugging in with the wattages of those things, because a 300 watt heater is a whole lot different than a 50 watt heater. And so the electrician's going to be able to look at those. If you just put aquarium heater, he's not going to know. But if you give him the specifics of what it pulls, what that individual heater pulls, he's going to be able to determine what size breakers to use and all of that kind of stuff to avoid the blowing. You and I are old when we still refer to it as blowing fuses. Yeah. It's tripping breakers is the modern approach, but we are old enough to remember the old screw-in little glass fuses. But anyway, electrical, water, 2 absolutely critical things. The last thing I'll add about electrical, this sounds weird, but I promise I've been in this situation. I know if you're going to be one of those people that is going to have aquariums in the center of your room, think about
Mhm.
where the power is going to come from for those. If you're doing this on a concrete floor, you don't have a whole lot of options. One of the critical mistakes that Lisa and I made, even though we've never needed it, we had the concrete that I'm sitting on right now installed in this building. It used to be wood. We ripped all that out because there's no way the wood would have held all of this. We had concrete put in. I regret so much not getting outlets put in the floor. It's something that has to be done. Well, it doesn't have to be, but it would probably cost as much to have an electrician come out here, cut the concrete, put outlets in, replace the concrete in those areas. It probably cost just as much as the concrete did to begin with. But if I had put those outlets in here, at least with conduit running to it that we could run the wires through later on, it would have been so much different. Because like this desk that I'm sitting at right now is in the middle of the room. I've got wires running across my ceiling and down to it. It looks horrible. And if we ever put a tank in the middle of the room, which is something that we've talked about, where's the power going to come from for that? There's nothing worse than stepping over extension cords. I hate that more than anything in the world.
Yep. And I've got that same issue on both sides because I don't have anything hanging down back here, but the outlet itself, the power strip is up off the floor and it's connected to the stand, but then the cord runs down underneath the little area rug thing and then back up again to another power strip that's again off the floor. But and be careful though, if you're going to put outlets in cement or they exist, you have to have some mechanism there so that you're dealing with water, lots of aquariums. And so if something should happen where that tank cracks, leaks, and starts sending water out all over the place, it's either got to trip a breaker instantly or there needs to be a drain around it. And I don't know if you've ever recognized this or noticed this, but at the Aquashellas and stuff, I never had to deal with it before, but once I actually had a booth there and I'm thinking, okay, we've got all these aquariums here with all this water. And then I looked at the way they constructed the outlets in the floor and there was basically a space around there where it seemed like if water wound up on the floor, if a tank broke or somebody kicked over on accident, those 50-gallon, garbage cans full of water, it wasn't going to be like, hey, we just electrocuted everybody within a 50-foot perimeter here. So
right.
Yeah, that could be a tricky one.
Yeah, I mean, and that is getting a little bit nitpicky as far as, the tanks in the middle of the room. If you have to have it hanging from the ceiling, that's one thing. But, if you're building this fish room from scratch and you have the ability to do that, I would 100% do it. But you're absolutely right. Having it so that the room doesn't blow up if water gets down in there, because we're all going to overflow a tank at some point. If you haven't, well, it's only a matter of time before you do. It's a very good point. I've actually seen in like warehouses and stuff like that, the outlets put on a little post to where they're sitting up off the ground.
They're sitting up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good way of doing it too. But, that's something, one of the things I'd love to get like a big square tank to put in the center of the room in here and use it for stingrays. I mean, I would just love that. But my very first thing every time is, well, where's the power going to come from?
Right.
I mean, I don't have anywhere to run it. So if you're going to build a fish room perfectly by the book and it's a perfect world scenario, you can see you've spent a lot of money already and you don't even have an aquarium yet. Yeah. But getting that water access, getting the, first of all, getting permission from your wife to allow you to use that space for nothing but aquariums. And then the utilities are critical. What's next? What's the next thing we're thinking about?
All right. So we got water, we got electricity, we have our infrastructure. Now I am beginning to think about what kind of fish am I interested in keeping? Because that is going to dictate tank sizes, how you set up the tanks, how many tanks you're going to want, where they're going to be, all that stuff. And you might have like I did, you might have all kinds of different types of fish that you're interested in which case that's fine. But identify that because that is going to play a major role in everything else that you do. Yeah.
And, it's the difference between having 12 10-gallon tanks or one 240-gallon tank. I mean, depending on what it is that you want to do. But just believe me when I tell you this, once you make those decisions and you start to look at how am I going to maintain all of these, you'll be glad you got your water in there and their drain. Just saying.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're welcome. Oh, yeah. But yeah, and I think it's at this point too, you would have probably made this decision before, but it goes along with that is you're deciding what this fish room is going to be used for. Mm-hmm. Are you going to make money out of it? Is it just going to be something you're doing for fun, which is what most people are going to do? Yeah. Are you going to make videos and share your experiences on social media? You know, these are all easy decisions that would be made. But is there, I don't even know if I want to frame this as a question. There is another thing to look at that I don't know if I've ever had be an issue. But because, you know, if you're doing this in a basement, it's not going to be too much of an issue. But there is the insulation factor of the room. Being able to keep the room heated or cooled or whatever it is that you're going to do. If you're setting up your fish room in a shed on a concrete slab, you know, insulation is going to be absolutely critical. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on it though. But the reason why
it is very, very important. And that's why I said you got to identify the fish. Because if 99% of people are going to be keeping fish that require tropical temperatures, if it's, like I said, if it's the Goodeids, if it's cool water fish, it's a much smaller issue most of the time, depending on where you're at. But no, you're right. I mean, that was one of the first things that we had to decide when we built the fish room. Initially, we put heaters in every tank. There was 25 tanks on the other side because we wanted to be able to come down here and not be too hot. But that, you want to talk about a power draw, that's massive. God. And so you're 100% right. Whether you're in an outbuilding or a basement, we're very blessed in the sense that for whatever reason, the temperatures down here are remarkably stable, no insulation. So we're in a townhome and we're in a center unit. So it's nice that we don't have all four walls exposed. That I'm sure that helps a lot. The front wall basically isn't exposed either because you've got the garage that extends out. So really we have just like this back wall here. And throughout the entire year, with very little effort, I can keep this room at 80 degrees. And so what I've decided, and I highly recommend you as well, you, the listener, heating the room most of the time is going to be a lot more cost effective than trying to heat 20, 30, 40, 50, 80 aquariums like what we had up here.
It's very true. I would take everything you're saying and I would add one more caveat to it. I don't even know if that's the right way of saying it, but when you say, let's say you're somebody who has a basement that's like not the best as far as temperature goes. And so you're like, well, I'm going to keep Goodeids and I'm going to keep Danios and goldfish and things that, don't need tropical temperatures. I think you're making a mistake if you just say it'll be fine. Because our tastes change. Our tastes change all the time. We want to try new things. Oh, I want to try African cichlids. I want to try discus. And, I would set up a fish room, again, perfect world, to be where it could be whatever it is you want. If there's no insulation in there, don't just say, well, I'm going to just keep fish that don't need that. I would still insulate it. I would still make sure you have the heat because you never know when you're going to change your mind. I agree with you 110%. Heating the room is the best. However, not if it's a lounge like you're talking about. Yeah. Me personally, I wouldn't do that. If I'm going to have 6 or 8 tanks, I'm going to heat all of those individually just to avoid having the hot room. If it's a business, then hey, it's warm in there. Cry me a river, But if this is something that I want to sit in and watch a ball game or something like that and have friends over and we're all going to hang out, nobody wants to hang out in a room they're all going to be sweating in. What do we just go to the sauna? Like that's not going to be fun for anybody. So I do think making the decision of what fish you're going to keep is critical. That's what this hobby's all about. But I think you should set the room up to where you can change your mind down the road. Because if you don't, once you have all of those tanks in there, I mean, you think you're going to pull them all out and put insulation in? No, you're not going to do it. So it could ruin things for everybody involved. So just set it up to where you can change your mind. Because to go from Godeids to discus is a big jump.
Uh-huh. And then you're throwing heaters in there, you're tripping breakers, you're doing all that kind of stuff. I 100% agree that you should plan the perimeter and all that infrastructure as if you could do anything and give yourself the freedom and spend the money up front to do so. 100%, which I don't know if you were going to go there, probably not, but it sparked something in my head, and that is make sure the floors are exactly the way you want them. So if you are building a fish room, you're like, oh, I've got hardwood floors here. Like you mentioned this briefly, but you recognize that if those floors get wet, and they absolutely positively will at some, you're going to have a tank break at some point. You're going to overflow a tank. You're going to have an issue. If you've got hardwood floors and you've got a million tanks down there, how are you getting those hardwood floors out? You're not. So we down here, we have a concrete, basement, and then we just put some tile. We tiled the entire basement. We've got some area rugs. If those get wet, I'll toss them. I don't care. But nothing's going to happen to the tile. And there's been a number of times where it's like, that's a lot of water. Now it goes right into our floor drains. We dry it out appropriately and all that, but it didn't matter. If you don't ever put carpet as you're in, don't put a fish room on carpet. That's a horrible, horrible idea. Rip the carpet out, put some tile down. Trust me, but be aware, because once those tanks are in, you're not changing the floors.
Ask me how I know how right you are. The very first fish room that Lisa and I set up together, and when I say I've done this 8 times, I'm talking about since Lisa and I have been together. Before that, way back in the day in the 90s, it was always kind of like my living room that also had a bunch of tanks in it. So I don't know if I would call them fish rooms. But anyway, the very first fish room that Lisa and I set up was kind of hard to explain, but it was a room in the house that we were renting that we called it the lobby. You walked into this room that was like 12 by 12, and there was 3 bedrooms that the doors to go into those bedrooms were in that room. So it was like a little lobby. And like idiots, we set that room up as a fish room. And so all of our kids had to walk through the fish room to get to their bedrooms. It was kind of funny. But that room had indoor-outdoor carpet in it, which you would think, well, that's kind of made for that kind of thing. It's not. But we couldn't rip it out because this was a rental house. Yeah. And something that you don't think about is you're splashing water. You net this fish to take it out and put it over in that tank, and you're dripping water down. You can say you're going to be careful all you want. It is impossible to not get water on the floor if you're a fish keeper. Yeah. And it sits there and it starts to mildew and it starts to stink, and it is the worst. So agree with you 100%. Area rugs, get the cheapest area rugs you can get from Walmart or whatever the store is near you, so that you don't feel horrible just throwing them away if something horrible happens. And I would also add, when it comes to the floors, another mistake that Lisa and I made in here. It's a mistake that still haunts me to this day. We had the expense of getting the concrete put in here, which we were not expecting. It cost us $6,000 to get concrete put in this room. That was $6,000 we were not expecting to spend. So all of a sudden, a lot of our budget was eaten up on a surprise. And we were just pinching pennies, and I overlooked something that I regret, and that is to seal the floor with something like an epoxy or something like that. Like what I wish I had done in here was to use like one of those garage kits that is the epoxy that you put down, and then they have the ones where you can throw the little flakes on it to give it the texture and stuff like that. We absolutely should have done that, not only to protect the concrete, but just to make it look like it's not a concrete floor. Yeah. those kits are not outrageously expensive, but for us, everything was like on a timetable, and we were already behind schedule, and we had to move in. And there's, again, not in this room, no way possible to do that after the fact. The aquariums are in. I could, I suppose, paint around them, but that would just be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Now you can't move the tanks, because if you do, there's a big spot that's not painted. Just go and get you one of those $150 Rust-Oleum epoxy kits and put that down. You'll be so much happier with that. I wish I had done it myself.
Or tile it if you want
Or
something different. Yeah, just do what we did. Just get the dollar per square foot or what. I don't even know if it's that much, but just, I remember Luke was a little kid and he was washing the floors, right? Because you got to get all the minute dust up, and I'm laying down the sticky tiles, and he was behind me by about 5 feet, and he was probably, I don't even know how old at that time, 6 years old, and he's over there, no, he wasn't, I don't even know how old, what was he, like 4? I have no idea at that point. And he's over there just scrubbing away, and he did a great job, and then he'd take the towel and dry it, and we just kept going, and we knocked it out. It took the better part of probably 4 days, but we did it.
Are you talking about the self-adhesive, like, laminate tiles?
Okay. Right there on the cement. Yeah. Worked just fine. I mean, it's been down here for going on not 20 years, but probably 18 years or so.
I've been in your fish room. I've been in the room that you're in right now. I do not recall looking down at the floors. Shame on me. Yeah, just assumed they were concrete.
No.
Yeah.
It's all like a brown tile.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's smart. A whole lot easier to clean than concrete would be too. So maybe possibly a little slippery but I don't know. It depends on what kind of tile it is, but no, that is definitely smart. Just avoid concrete or avoid carpet at all costs. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So we have our room. We got permission from the wife to put our tanks in there. We made sure we've got water, we've got electrical. The room is already insulated, or maybe we had to add a little. We know what kind of fish. Now we need to start moving tanks in, and it's going to get to the point where we're going to have to start coming up with some kind of a rack system. Yep. I know the answer to this because I've been in your fish room, but are you going to build racks out of 2x4s, or are you going to use the expensive $300 6-foot Husky racks from Home Depot to put your tanks on?
So if you are at all handy and you want the fish room to look decent, I would build the racks. I built all of my own fish tank racks, both when this had 40 tanks in here, the other side there was like one exception. Everything else was built, and mostly because, to me, once you're at this point, you should be drawing out this fish room the way you would want it to look in its final form. Do not make the mistake that so many people make. I'm going to put a tank here, tank here, tank here, tank here. They're all on one level. And they're like, I'm going to start adding more. And then having to pull those out, get those stands out, and then start building or buying racks that are going to allow you to go vertical. Because the whole point of a fish room, to me, this is a gallery. It's not vertical. The other side is at least 2 high. This side, before it was a gallery, was 3 fish tanks high in some places. So map that out first. I would recommend doing the vertical building, and then you can extend out on all the walls. But I would not go single level and then have to reconvert that all to double or triple or however you want to do it.
Yeah, and I'm going to say something, and I actually had this conversation. I do not remember the numbers exactly, but I had a conversation with a friend of mine that's a carpenter. And it's going to surprise a lot of people. If you're, let's say you're going to put 40 tanks in your fish room, they're all going to be 20 gallons. They're going to be 20 highs turned sideways. You're going to go 3 levels high, and you need racks for those 40 tanks. I promise you, if you are not handy at all, if you don't even know the difference between a flathead and a Phillips head, and you're just, it's not possible for you to build your own, I promise you, if you hire like a handyman carpenter to come in and build those racks, it will cost you less, even paying the contractor to do it, than it would be if you were to go buy all of those Husky racks. The Husky racks are great. We've got a bunch of them in our warehouse right now. They are super strong. $300. You don't need a degree in engineering to put them together. Super simple. But if you're going to be putting 40 tanks on these, you're going to buy what? 6 of those? So you're spending $1,800 on racks where you can pay a contractor. He'll be in and out in 3 hours. Build the racks to your specifications. You would have to draw them up with the measurements and all of that kind of stuff. But a good carpenter, a mediocre carpenter, could come in and build all of those racks in 4 hours, probably cost you half the money that those Husky racks would. Yeah. The Husky racks are great, but they're expensive.
Yeah. There's no doubt. And not only that, but like for us, we paint all of ours. As you can see, I paint everything black. And so it just kind of blends in. They don't really stand out in any way. And like you said, the nice thing about that, you can customize them to whatever length, width, height you want. And so, hey, I'm going to triple stack 33 longs like I did. Not a problem. Hey, I want to put 9 10 gallons stacked end to end on a single rack. Easy. I had a rack where I built, it was 29s on the bottom and then 20 longs on the second level and 20 longs on the third level. So you can do all these crazy things that are just, and you can fit them exactly how you want them on the wall space that you have. But again, the key, figure out what that looks like before you start throwing tanks in that room. Because if as an example, let's say I was going to convert this gallery back to a fish room. And I said, hey, you know what? I really do want to have a triple high 20 long rack. Right, I'm going to stack 20s triple high. I'm not going to put 3 20 gallons side by side. I'm going to build that first rack that's going to be 20 gallon longs, stacked 3 high, and that's going to go in the corner. And then, the rest of the wall is going to be empty. I'll fill that in later. I'm not going to try to backtrack and then do that later on. It's just too much of a pain. Why do it the way you think it should be looking at the end? Do that initially. You'll be in a lot better shape.
Agreed. And the last thing I'll say on racks, you can say as much as you want, but it's the last thing I will say. Don't make the mistake I've made many, many times. In fact, I've got one right here that I still am haunted by this mistake. I agree with you, painting the racks, and everybody paints them black. What are you going to do? Paint them red? I mean, everybody's going to paint their aquarium stands black. Paint them before you put your tanks on there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's so easy to get excited like I've done. And it's like, I'll paint them down the road. And then you set your tanks up and it just doesn't happen. And case in point is right over there. I would show you, but I've got too much stuff in the way. I've got a double stack 125 and a double stack 75 right next to each other. And they've been sitting there not painted for 3 years. Yeah. And it's not that you can't paint them when they're in place. You absolutely can, but it's just one of those things that, and maybe it's just me, I don't know, but it's so much easier to paint them before you put any tanks on there. Just get it over with. Paint is cheap. A 3-year-old could paint these stands, have some fun with it, get it done before you put the tanks on there. Next thing, what is next thing? I mean, heating.
Well, you're setting up your racking system. You've painted the racks like you're supposed to before you put the tanks on. Funny side note about that. One time the boys were helping me paint. They were still pretty small. Like an idiot, I would always buy water-based paint, a semi-gloss, or a matte, but just something that's not going to, where the water is going to run, streaks. I bought oil-based for 1 gallon. And like, oh, this stuff kind of smells. And that's the other thing too, is keep in mind, most of the time, like if you're in a basement, you're cutting the wood, maybe in a garage or a driveway, but you're actually building the racks down in the fish room because you're not getting those downstairs most of the time. They're going to be big and unwieldy. So just remember that when you want to take them apart, you're going to be sawing them into pieces like I've had to do. But yeah, they were painting oil-based paint and they got paint on their hands. Joanna comes home, mom comes home, and she's like, all right, guys, it's time to eat. So we go upstairs and I'm still down here finishing up painting one of the stands. And she freaks out. She's like, they've got paint all over, basically from their forearm up to their fingertips. It's not coming off. It's not coming off. She's freaking out, like soap and water on an oil-based paint. I mean, she lost it. Like she's getting ready to call, like, I don't know, people. I don't know who she was going to call. And I'm like, well, it's oil-based. She's like, well, it's not coming off their hands. I'm like, mineral oil. We'll just take it off just like soap and water. And so got some mineral oil and the stuff. Sure enough, the stuff came right up, but she was still so mad at me for doing that. She's like, that's it. They can't help paint anymore. I'm like, I will make sure I get the water base. It was a mistake. I didn't realize that they were, getting it all over their hands. But so anyway, water based. Okay. Next thing you asked, next thing after the racks have gone up. I think at this point before you put those racks up, we missed something.
Uh-oh.
Really, what should be happening is your drainage system needs to go in first. So if you're going to have one, as an example, we talked about, the importance of water, but for me, it's not here anymore. But when I had this side of the fish room and it's still on the other side, I had PVC with holes or a piece of PVC coming straight up, and it was on a decline. It goes all the way around the perimeter of the room and right into a floor drain. And so when we're draining tanks, we can stick our hoses right in that PVC and it drains. I believe the standard is about a 1-inch decline for every 4 feet. That's what I used. And so all the Python hoses go right in this floor drain. The floor drain or the PVC goes right into the floor drain. Works out wonderfully. So you can't put your racks in until, if you're going to do that, you have that perimeter, that floor, that tank draining perimeter in. You can put the racks in and then later on deal with water in, but you got to have your water, your drainage water, your wastewater system in first.
That's a very good point. I mean, if you're in a situation like I've been in the past where you don't have a main drain to drain to, then you can skip this. But yeah, I've had it. What I used to love to do was have my PVC, and I would use 2-inch or whatever PVC, and I would run, instead of drilling holes in the PVC, I would put T's in it.
Yeah, and then just run it up.
Yeah, have it sticking up.
That's
so
a better way to do
suck
it.
on the hose. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that makes things very easy. Put one every other rack or something like that. Absolutely. You could add that after the racks are in, but boy, will it be a pain in the butt. I mean, it's so much easier if you do that beforehand. And I think that's when you're setting up a fish room, I think you should be thinking about this the whole time. Easy maintenance. You know, I don't want to make this a chore. I want this to be easy to maintain. An easy to maintain aquarium is going to be maintained a whole lot more. So, don't have it be something that is going to be a pain in the butt to do. Make your life as easy as possible. If you don't have a drain in the floor, the Brute trash cans on wheels are kind of the gold standard for our hobby. And then I would take that a step further. It was something that I've done many, many times. You take a pump. I love the Seche Ultra Zero. You put that in there with a garden hose. Mm-hmm. And once it gets filled up, you just plug that in and let it drain out to wherever. And rather than using 5-gallon buckets and constantly, just let that trash can fill up and then pump the water out of there. I'm at a point right now, 51 years old. I'm not setting up a fish room if I don't have somewhere to take the water easily. I am not carrying a bucket. I'm just not doing it. I'm over that.
No, I hear you. But that brings up the other point is, okay, you've got stands in. Let's say you've dealt with how you're going to get your wastewater to its final destination. Now you have to decide at this point, how are you getting water into the tanks? I think that's huge because that's going to determine whether or not you have to drill tanks before you put them on stands, right? So if you're going to do some type of an overflow system where you can run water and it's just maybe a constant overflow, or you've got valves. By the way, I have done 1 million fish room tours. If you want an idea of how that works, listen up. Primetime Aquatics, Mario's fish room, Jason's fish room, Mike's fish room tour, Rick's fish room tour, I've done multiples of each. The guy Mario, who is like a genius at setting up fish rooms, basically set up all their rooms, and I mean they are insanely well thought out. And he set up all their water, their auto water change systems. But you have to decide that. For me, I didn't want to drill a bunch of tanks, so I have the water draining into a wastewater system via gravel vacs. And then I have from our water source just a hose that has the ability to hook on with a valve right there that just, you can drain them all, shut that valve off, not having to go back to the sink all the time. But you got to decide, do you want to drill your tanks, auto water change, or are you going to do some other mechanism?
I'm gonna break a little bit of news here. Lisa and I are entertaining the idea of setting up a new system. Let's just leave it at that. And that was one of the very first things I decided was I'm going to drill all of the tanks. And I got to be honest with you, not looking forward to that, because if I'm going to drill 48 tanks, I'm probably going to buy 50.
Yeah.
Because if I buy 50, I won't break a single tank. But if I buy exactly 48, a couple of them are getting broke.
Yeah.
That's just the way it's going to work out. I'm not looking forward to drilling the glass, but yeah, I agree. Filling up the tanks. Oh man. Is anybody taking a 5-gallon bucket and pouring it into their tanks anymore? I don't know anybody that's doing that. If you're doing that, then you must be a bodybuilder or something. At least get a daggone Python that you can run and fill up your tanks. Pythons, as much as I think it is one of the best things that's ever been invented for this hobby in the history of this hobby, you and I have talked about this in the past. You do have the challenge with a Python. I don't like turning it on and off at the end of the Python itself.
Yeah.
Because eventually the pipes get weakened and they burst, or the hoses get weak and they burst.
Yeah.
So running back and forth to turn it off at the sink is never any fun, but it's still a whole lot more fun than filling up buckets and pouring them in. So yeah, having a way to fill up those tanks, critical. Yeah. And even if you're not able to get water into the room, you have to run it from the laundry room, which is down the hall, get you a 100-foot Python. Yeah. You'll be so glad you did. And I think a Python is better than just using a garden hose, because garden hoses inevitably are like, and all of a sudden everything flies out. Yeah. Whereas with the Python,
garden hoses aren't flexible like the Python hoses too.
That's true. Yep. So now we have tanks filled up. I mean, we haven't really talked deep into heating. I guess we did, because you talked about your room.
Heating, by that point, you've made that decision. Did you heat the room or heat the individual tanks?
Right. So what's left? I mean, we're set up. Oh, yeah.
That kind of important thing called filtration.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So, but that is something you have to have figured out before you ever did anything. When we did ours, I had decided, and pretty much if you're going to have tens and tens of tanks, it's air driven most of the time, right? We did sponge filters with a giant central pump. I have an PVC air system that goes around the perimeter. You want a closed loop system for air driven systems. And then you've got the self-tapping holes. By the way, gemco.com is the place to go for this. We are not sponsored by them. They're old school. You're going to have to call them. You're going to have to order on the phone. The lady that answers is the nicest human being on earth, but they've got the air valves, and they're experts, absolute experts in helping you figure out, okay, what size air system do I need? And they will ask a million questions. But anyway, closed loop system, central air pump, air lines coming down. I got the air valves on top that controls the amount of air. We've got sponge filters. Some people use Matten filters. If you want to be ancient and use under gravel filters, knock yourself out. You'll have a lot of problems and wonder why you did that later on. You could do.
How dare you?
I know you could do sump systems, but in that particular case, got to be really careful. You need to have a separate quarantine system. And usually the sumps would be, if I could go back, I think I would actually have built a space to have a sump that would have been on each individual rack. And I think for mechanical filtration, to have that ability would have been so much better. More expensive to be sure, takes up some space, but mine is just an air-driven system on the other side. And air-driven systems have problems with mechanical filtration. So there's that.
And I want to elaborate a little bit on closed loop systems, because when you hear that, it might not make sense to someone who's never done one before. If you imagine a garden hose has a spigot, or it's hooked up to the spigot, that's what we call it in the South. And on the other end, you have whatever your nozzle is that you're using to spray that out of. If you don't have the water running, it's turned on at the spigot, but you're not releasing it. When you go to spray your car off after you put the suds on it, what happens? It's like a lot of pressure comes out at first, and then it dissipates. That's what's happening with air if you just run a line straight across your basement and then tap off of it. The pressure's building up in that, and it will eventually blow the pipe completely apart. So instead, you make it a big loop that feeds itself. It's like a hula hoop with a little piece coming off the end to hook into the blower or the linear piston pump, whatever you're using. That way the air continuously goes around and around that system rather than building up pressure at the end. I don't know if any of that made sense, but are you using a linear piston pump, or are you one of those old timers?
You would never want to use if you're in your house, you're not using a blower. That would be the worst possible thing. There's way too loud. Linear air piston pump from Gemco. And the other reason you're running that closed loop system is, in your example, now imagine that hose, you've got holes drilled in it every 12 inches, and the water's coming out, i.e. the air is going into each one of your sponge filters. By the time you get to the end, there's not a lot of air left. Right. And so you get a significant difference in air pressure between the filters that are closest to the pump and the ones that are furthest away. When you have a closed loop, that really isn't nearly as big of a problem. It's really easy to manage how much air is going into each aquarium.
You're absolutely right. And you're also absolutely right about Gemco and the way they handle themselves. It's always been an absolute delight to call them and be like, hey, listen, I'm stuck here. I know I need something, but I don't know what to need. Or what I need. And by the way, it is with an H, JEHMCO.
Yeah. .com.
I'll try to remember to put a link in the description, but in case I forget, JEHMCO.com. And when you go to their site, you're going to see a lot of things on there, and you're going to be like me. You're going to be like, I don't know what this does. I don't know what that does. Mm-hmm. Just call them and say, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm using so far. What do I need to accomplish? And you need this, and this. And they've never been wrong for me. No. Like every time I've ever needed anything, whether I'm ordering 300 valves for my beta system that doesn't exist anymore, or whatever it is I'm doing, they either know exactly what you need, or they'll have a really good idea of something that you could use in that situation. I can't recommend Gemco enough. I absolutely love that company. And if you're building a fish room, you will become familiar with Gemco.
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody else that sells the volume and the variety of stuff that they do. They're the best. Not sponsored. We're just telling you facts right now. Yeah. So I don't know if there's, I think we've pretty much set this room up at this point, haven't we?
Lighting. You're going to have a bunch of tanks. Again, this is going to depend on, are you planted, not planted? People can go really cheap and use shop lights. If you've got I did this with a lot of times when I would have tanks that are on the same racking system, where I could use one light to light multiple tanks. So when I had my 10-gallon rack, so there was 3 end-to-end on 3 different levels, so 9 tanks in total, I would just use one, I think it was like a 30-inch light or 36-inch light across all 3. And then, so you can save money that way. Not every single tank needs its own light depending on the size. You might have a couple of 29 gallons that are sharing a level on a racking system. Be like, oh, I can just run a 4-foot light here and still get enough light in the tanks. Especially if they're not planted. You could run LED strip lighting. A lot of people do that just to illuminate their tanks. So that's another place where you can literally spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars in lighting and not realize it. Like, imagine you're like, hey, I'm going to put 25 tanks in a fish room, but now I want to buy 25 lights. Guess what? you just committed to at least $1,000 retail price, depending on the size of your tanks. More likely, $1,500 to $2,000. It adds
Yep.
up real quick. So be thoughtful about that. So water changes, temperature, filtration, lighting. We talked about positioning. Oh. Tank position. Don't put your tanks on the floor. It's hard to get water out of that. You're not going to look. Trust me, you will not look at tanks on the floor. You're not going to sit on the floor and like, oh, look at these fish. This is great. I love sitting on the concrete floor. It's really hard to do water changes out of a tank that's on the floor. It's there unless you're a breeding system. It's pointless. And be careful, a tank's too high. If you can't stand there and look into a tank, that was a mistake that I had made. We had two 20 gallons that were up near the ceiling. We had a 33 long that was up near the ceiling. They were pointless. They were almost good for nothing because you're going to sit up there, just like look way up there. And it was really tough to enjoy those tanks. So it's just tanks for the sake of having aquariums, not necessarily to enjoy. So just be really careful about how high and how low you put your tanks. My best advice is sit down in a chair and say, okay, this is nice for level number one. If I sit here, I can enjoy these aquariums, and then stand up and be like, oh, okay, well now if I'm standing, I'm looking like right at the middle of the aquarium. That's what I did on the other side, and it worked out really well. So be careful how high and how low those tanks are.
If I'm setting up a fish room that is for leisure, it's for my hobby, there's no way I'm putting tanks above my head. Yeah. Absolutely no way. For a business wants as many tanks as possible, and so they have to have as many fish as possible. Makes total sense. But I'll be daggoned if I'm getting up on a ladder to maintain tanks that are my leisure tanks. I'm not doing it. I don't even like, if I have to do something in the back of this tank, I got to get on a ladder because it's a 3-foot deep tank that's, 5 feet up in the air. I don't even like that. So, getting up on tanks, and I've done it. I've put tanks way up there, for the breeding operation and stuff like that. And it's cool to look up there and you see fish everywhere, but it is not fun to maintain those. No. And I feel like I cannot stress enough, making it easier for yourself is going to make you enjoy a fish room a whole lot more than it being a big burly chore that nobody eventually, in the beginning it's exciting, but eventually you're not going to want to do it.
I got two more things that just popped into my head real quick. Talking about tank placement, make sure you've got at least 12 to 14 inches between the top of the tank and the bottom of the shelf of the tank above it. If you're going to go multi-stack, trust me, I've made that mistake where 9 inches will be enough. You can't get fish in and out. You can't put anything in the tanks because you can't fit the stuff. So give yourself space more than you think you're going to need. The most enjoyable tanks I have are on that other side because I left a lot of space. When I had built the fish room on this side, I started getting a little greedy, wanted more tanks than I reasonably should have. Much more it's so frustrating when you don't have the space to get in those tanks and do the things you want to do. Even just putting a gravel vac in there and having to do the origami, okay, I got to put it on the side, and then I got to stick it in like that, and then I can't stand it up to actually do anything. It's a pain. Give yourself space.
Agreed.
Lids is the other one. You got a fish room, you should be covering your tanks, because if you don't, you're going to have a humidity issue. Now I say that every single tank on this side is not covered except for the Buddha tank on the one side. But in the fish room, almost all those tanks are covered to control, you don't want fish jumping, control evaporation. And even with lids, figure out what you're doing about humidity. You're going to have it. So like I've already mentioned briefly, we have two dehumidifiers, one on this side, one on the other. And those dehumidifiers have a drain that goes directly into my wastewater system, because you're not going to want to empty those things twice a day. No one does that, right? So dehumidifiers are a must. You put them on, you just let them go, because you don't want your humidity creeping up 60, 70, 80% in that room. Ideal humidity is somewhere around 45 to 50% or so. It's comfortable, but you don't have to worry about mold. So make sure you have a plan for that.
I've got one more very minor suggestion, but if you have a fish room with dozens and dozens and dozens of tanks in it, this will be some of the best money you've ever spent, and you probably wouldn't think about it. When we had our garage fish room set up, which was the coolest fish room we've ever had, I guess as opposed to this one, we had 127 tanks in a basically oversized 2-car garage. We went to Lowe's one day and bought a little push cart. It was like $80. It's made of like a really rigid plastic, and it's just a little 4-wheel cart that had 2 levels on it. The bottom level, we would have things like water conditioners and salt and things like that on it. And then on the top level, we would have all of our fish foods. Yeah. And we actually used like a little Tupperware containers. And then I would just lay a piece of polycarbonate on top of all of it. So they just lift that off, and I can just wheel around and just grab food and throw it in. It sounds so silly, but it was a very, very much life-changing thing. As long as you can keep from it accumulating other stuff that shouldn't be on it, it's great to be able to wheel it through there to feed the fish. Little thing. I think it was like $80, which means it's probably 120 now, but that was a great addition to the fish room. If you got 5 tanks, it might be a little overkill, but 5 tanks, I'm just keeping the bags of food on top of whatever tank I'm feeding. It's no big deal.
Yeah. And with the lids, you mentioned polycarbonate. That stuff, the greenhouse siding, I think it's 8 mil polycarbonate. That's the stuff if you're going to have a lot of tanks, buy that in sheets. They come in easy ship packs, like 2x4, and then just kind of map out. You can cut them in any shape that you want. You can cut feed holes, stuff for airlines, hang on back returns, that kind of thing. So that, rather than doing glass, that might be a much more economical way to do a fish room. That's what we did. A lot of our tanks had that polycarbonate. We kind of switched back to glass for some of them just because it was a cleaner look, but it's a great way to save a lot of money.
Well, and in some situations, it might be your only option because like, I don't know if you're going to do a rack of tanks, like 20 highs or 20 longs for that matter, and you're going to put them sideways so that when you're looking at the rack, you're looking at the ends.
Right.
To my knowledge, they don't make lids that open that way where the small side opens up. So you're not going to have a choice but to use something like a polycarbonate. And that stuff is great. I personally, because I have a lot of cutting devices, saws and stuff like that, I buy the 8x4 sheets. And you know, that one 8x4 sheet will go a long way. You can make a lot of lids out of that. Got to be careful. The edges can be a little bit sharp, but that stuff is great, and make it exactly to fit. You can cut the corner off so that your airline can go through it and everything. I mean, it's great. So good point. So
I have expended all of my fish room advice, I think.
I don't think I have any more either. If I was to give more, I would just be repeating myself. Make it easier on yourself. That's the biggest thing. I know you think it's going to be fun and exciting, but eventually it's going to get overwhelming. Make sure it's easy. That's probably the main thing I want people to get out of this.
Have fun and take your time. Take your time. Don't rush through the process. When you start rushing, you start making mistakes. You start not planning properly, and you have issues. So, as always, thank you everybody for being here. Really enjoy all of your support. We will be back same time, same place next week. Have a great week, everyone.